Holy Gospel according to St. Luke, the 13th chapter. Now Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath, and just then there appeared a woman with a spirit that had crippled her for 18 years. I read somewhere that the average lifespan was like 45 years, so this is nearly half her life that she's been crippled. She was bent over and was quite unable to stand up straight. When Jesus saw her, he called her over and said, "Woman, you are set free from your ailment." When he laid his hands on her, immediately she stood up straight and began praising God. But the leader of the synagogue, indignant because Jesus had cured on the Sabbath, kept saying to the crowd, "There are 6 days on which work ought to be done. Come on those days and be cured, and not on the Sabbath day." But the Lord answered him and said, "You hypocrites, does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the manger and lead it away to give it water? And ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan bound for 18 long years, be set free from the bondage on the Sabbath day?" When he had said this, all his opponents were put to shame, and the entire crowd was rejoicing at all the wonderful things that he was doing. This is the gospel of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
God's grace, mercy, and peace be yours this day, through Christ, our Savior and Lord. Amen. Wendell counted and made the company deposit every other week at the small business at which he worked. Being a small company and rather disorganized, they were often understaffed, and Wendell had the time to himself to work as he needed. He worked in an attic office, no one to watch to ensure that he made a proper count each week, but Wendell was a very kind and conscientious man, and he was very trustworthy. Although he lived alone and lately he had become rather depressed, and he decided to try to cheer himself up by treating himself, going out to a nice meal, buying a couple of things that he'd been interested in, splurging a little bit. And especially as a bookkeeper, he was embarrassed when at the end of the month he found that he didn't quite have enough to pay his rent. One day he found himself looking at the tally sheet, considering something he never thought he would do. He filled in the total for the checks to be deposited, and he looked for a long time at the blank line for the cash deposit. He looked at the small pile of cash on the desk. This was a better deposit than most, with several large checks, and all he really needed was $50. Certainly it wouldn't be missed, as the company had been doing quite well lately. Wendell wrote a number on a tally sheet next to the cash deposit, carefully placed a $50 bill in his pocket, and bundled the remainder to take to the bank. We'll come back to Wendell in a minute. This gospel story that we've heard this morning is unique to Luke. It's only found in this gospel, which is always interesting. Why did it make it in this one? It didn't make it into the other ones. Raises some interesting questions that way. There are 6 different stories that are told of things that took place on the Sabbath. This is the 5 of 6, and it's the 3rd of 4 different healing stories on the Sabbath. It always interests me, who are the people that receive miraculous healing? And it's fascinating, I think, that we don't know this woman's name. It'd be nice to have a name to call her. We don't know her age exactly. We don't know anything about her family or her circumstances, her interests, her eye color, her hair color. We don't know if she has any pets. Who knows? All these things that you often might wonder about someone. We don't know if she was a good person whatsoever. Who are the people that are worthy to receive miraculous healing? The fact that any information that way is omitted suggests to me that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who she was. All that matters was that she was ill, that she was in need, that she was miserable, unhappy. And she came upon Jesus, and Jesus was able to help her. It says that she was bent, which I think is kind of an interesting word. She was bent. We don't know if this was scoliosis, natural curvature of the spine, or if she maybe had been injured, or if she had some kind of a disease. But clearly this would have been a difficult way to live. She would have been miserable. That word bent is kind of an interesting word. theologian, I can't help but read in all kinds of other possibilities. I wonder if this isn't suggestive of something bigger. Kind of a double meaning here. She's stuck in such a position that she can't see the world around her. Her focus is downward, on her own feet. She can't see what's going on in the lives of others. And I got to wonder, is that not suggestive of how we can get sometimes? Turned in on our own stuff, focused on our own worries, unable to see what's going on with people around us, concerned just with our own self-interest. And the bottom line of the story, Jesus straightens her. Okay, there's a woman who's bent, Jesus straightens her. Pretty short story, pretty straightforward, pardon the pun. Helps her to finally stand tall. She's able to stand up for the first time in half her life. Stand with dignity and pride. Stand tall. Face other people face to face for the first time in her adult memory, perhaps. That's what Jesus does. Helps us to find our place in the world. Helps us be able to look at others around us face to face. Helps us to have eyes not just to see people, but to recognize what's going on with them. See them with eyes of compassion. I've shared before, this story is about a certain principle that I try to hold on to, and I've shared about this before, that years ago, actually when I was in school, I realized that ministry has a lot of responsibilities, a lot of things that need to get done. Like every month there's a newsletter, every Sunday there's a sermon to write, there are agendas to tend to, there are meetings to go to, there are all these different things responsibilities. And I realized on internship, there was one day when somebody came in and talked to me, and I thought, but I'm right in the middle of this thought, I'm right in the middle of a newsletter, and I realized, what would Jesus do? There's a person standing here who wants to talk. I need to set down whatever else I was doing and talk to the person, because that's what Jesus did. So from that time, I realized this phrase, people before principle. What that means is there are always going to be responsibilities, there are always going to be rules, there are always going to be obligations. But when you come upon a person, come upon an individual that wants to talk, that maybe could use a hand, we have to be willing to set down those other responsibilities for a moment. Because there's a person standing there. People before principle. There were rules in place in Jesus' day. The rules were hard and fast. Jesus grew up as a faithful Jew. It was ingrained in him. You observe the Sabbath. That's the rule. Hey, it's right up there, top of the Ten Commandments. Honor the Lord your God, honor the Sabbath, right up there at the top. Jesus knows this one backwards and forwards, and he's been breaking it time and again. As I mentioned, 5th of 6 stories on the Sabbath, 3rd of 4 healings on the Sabbath, breaking that rule and doing things on the Sabbath that you're not supposed to do. Why? He's not breaking them just to be rebellious. He's not breaking them for any personal gain or to be irresponsible or to thumb his nose at the authorities. He's not just trying to stir people up or create a rebellion. He's saying people need to come first. There are rules, there are laws, there are responsibilities to help people to get along day to day. But in the end, when you see someone in need, heck, you'd even help out an animal. That's Jesus' point. You'd take your animal over to get water on the Sabbath. Here's somebody in need. Why would you not help them in that moment when there's something that can be done? People before principle. Jesus not only breaks that rule, he breaks another rule. He touches a woman to heal her. You don't touch a woman. Even a husband and wife in the ancient world, you don't publicly show affection. You don't put your arm around each other. You don't hold hands in public. We're obviously a different world today, but in the Middle East, those aren't things that you do. Public displays of affection are not okay, especially between a man and a woman who are not married. That's really forbidden. And it says that Jesus touches this woman. Again, not just to be rebellious, not just to break the rules and say, what are you going to do about it? He's not being a stinker. He's saying, no, this is more important. I realize there are rules in place, but this woman needs help. God can help her. God can work through me to do it. Breaking the rules purposefully. People before principle. Were an impartial set of laws and justice the final standard, there would be no room for what we've come to know as grace. Grace is another word for the same principle. People before principle. The same idea, the same concept can be called grace. Sometimes we're in the position of showing grace, demonstrating mercy and compassion. Sometimes we're the ones needing it. Time and again, God intervened and said, I care about you more than I care about the rules, more than I care about retribution, more than I care about punishment. I love you. I'm worried about you. I want to help you to get to a better place. What does that look like? 2 days later, Wendell asked his boss if he could meet with her. From the moment he'd taken the first steps down this path, he'd become increasingly anxious, and the guilt was killing him. He couldn't sleep and knew there was only one way to restore peace within himself. With his heart racing and a tear in the corner of his eye, Wendell placed the $50 bill on her desk. What's this? She asked. My confession, he quietly replied, and my resignation. Silence hung heavy in the air until he finally spoke again. I took it from the deposit to make my rent, but I found that I couldn't take it after all. I'm sorry. I'll be out by the end of the day. And he stood to leave. Hold on a second, Wendell, his boss said. Please, and she indicated for him to sit. She placed the $50 bill off to the side of her desk and asked, Wendell, are you okay? In his mind, all he'd been hearing were the words embezzlement, theft, stealing. But he looked up at her question and saw that she was looking at his eyes not with anger or accusation, but with concern, with curiosity and worry. Well, to be honest, I haven't been doing real well. And he continued to share about his depression and his loneliness, and she listened. She realized that he had very few people with whom he could really talk, and he had clearly needed to for some time. Wendell, she finally said, I need your help. And almost as an aside, she casually handed him the $50 bill and said, make your rent, you can make it up to me next month, and don't do it again without talking to me first. She continued, I've been thinking that our office has been too focused on work lately, and we need to relax a little, take time to get to know each other better, have a little fun. If I give you a budget, do you think you could plan a party for us? I'm thinking some food and games, just real simple, casual. What do you think? Can you help me with that? Wendell was dumbfounded. He was envisioning handcuffs in his future, and instead he was facing a party. Okay. Good, we're all set then. I'm thinking 2 weeks from Friday. Ask around and see if that works for everyone. Let me know tomorrow. And Wendell, thanks for coming to me. People before principle. I had an opportunity just this past week. I was late, as we all do. Sometimes we get running late. I was late and I was on the freeway, 70-mile-an-hour speed limit, going 50 behind this car. I'm already late. You're going 50. Why are you going 50? Speed limit says 70. Move! Until I finally had an opportunity to get around them. Saw the side of the car. Student driver. Sorry, okay. Thought crossed my mind. DMV rules of the road. Call highway patrol. Check that license plate. What's wrong with this person? It happens to all of us. We have rights. There are laws and rules that we live by. But Jesus today says, consider grace. Rather than getting angry, rather than throwing the rule book at someone, Jesus says, avoid court at all costs. Consider grace. Imagine what might be going on with them. Pray for them. Cheer for them. Love them. That's what grace looks like. helping people who are bent. Because God does that for us. When we do that, we're going to help keep our own blood pressure from spiking, which is a good thing. But we're also going to look a little more like Jesus and act a little more like him and make the world a little more like God created it to